All right, so we are officially ready to kick this thing off. The Virtual Rules Clinic is something that we put on at the beginning of every year. We have a kind of a varied audience here because we are speaking to league officials, coaches, managers, and umpires. And so we're going to try and keep that in mind that as we're presenting some of these rules and interpretations, we'll be trying to put ourselves into your shoes and be thinking about the consequences and the benefits of really knowing these rules when you're coming at it from different perspectives. So this is split into 2 days, 6:30 to 9 p.m. both days. And you can see that tonight we're going to be covering objectives, definitions, interference, obstruction, and the runner. We'll probably start the batter and finish up the batter tomorrow night. So a couple things that you might notice on the slides, the star indicates something that we have added. It's not necessarily something that you'll see in the rule book. These are our interpretations, our thoughts that will provide maybe a little bit more clarity or some context for some of the rules. And then anything that's new for 2025 will have the SU badge for a significant update. And then just a reminder that we're going to condense and paraphrase a lot. We obviously don't have enough space in a PowerPoint slideshow to put the entire text of all the rules and to be reading through all those. So there's no substitute for reading the rule book. We will introduce it. We will introduce the rules and we'll talk about them. Everything that we think is really relevant and that we can accomplish and we can cover within the space allowed. I'm just going to ask that tonight, when you have a question during the presentation, just go to the Zoom Q&A or the Zoom chat and just post your questions in chat. We will have logical stopping points at the end of each section where we'll go back through and we'll look at the questions that were posted or the comments that were posted, and we'll have some additional conversation about that. All right, so at this point, I'm going to introduce Mr. John Peretta. He is our trainer for the District 33 umpire staff, and he kind of leads all of the on and off field trainings. And without further ado, John, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Dave. And thanks everyone for being here, taking time out to learn the rules. I hope there's some umpires and some coaches in the audience today. There is a feature where you can raise your hand too, Dave. I don't know if you care if they use that or not as well, if something's really pressing. So one of the things I did want to say is this kind of like our Smile Diamond Clinic, we're pressed on time. So we're not going to cover every rule in the rule book. We're just going to kind of scratch the surface, touch upon some of the bigger ones, some of the ones you really should be concerned with. Also, if you notice, we're not going to go like from start to finish in the rule book. We do skip around because if you notice in the rule book, the rules, it's not exactly the most organized document ever. So so there are some things that kind of blend together. You have to kind of, one rule will carry you to another rule. For instance, if you have an illegal bat, you'll have to look at what the penalty is for an illegal bat, and that'll be somewhere else in the rule book. So you can either use the app, which you can get for free on littleleague.org to get, or you can actually, there's limited edition. This is 2023. I don't have the new 25, but for those of us that like the rule book in printed form, I know Father Rick does, I myself does as well as too. So you can order that through littleleague.org as well. So anyway, that's what we're going to do tonight, and we hope there's some questions. We hope you guys learned something. And Dave, next slide. Let's get started. So the rulebook starts out with 1.0, which is kind of objectives of the game and some of the equipment as well too. We'll start with the bat. These haven't changed that much, the rules over the years since we went to the USA bat standard. But one of the things you do need to know for this year is that Little League has banned all choke knobs, choke up assists, and thumb protectors. Little League, for some reason, consider those things a modification to the bat, That's just the way it is. I know there is a batting glove with the thumb protector already sewn in. We don't have a ruling on that so for right now, if you see that, I think I'd just let that one go. Um, Non-wood bats, they need to have the USA bat marking or the BB Corps for the upper divisions. And wood bats, there's no marking there's no certification on wood bats. The traditional batting donut is not permissible. We still see it, believe it or not. That rule has been in there for years, but we still see it sometimes. And then a couple years ago, they Little League outlawed pine tar at all levels. Why, I couldn't tell you. And one of the distinctions that I do want to make is there's a difference between damaged equipment and illegal equipment. Okay. So uh, if something's damaged, you just remove it. It's still legal equipment. It just happened to be damaged. It's not considered something illegal. Illegal is something that's been modified or altered in some way from other than the factory. But normal wear and tear, if there is a bat or something, it's just normal wear and tear. You just remove it. There's no penalty for that. So a damaged bat is not considered illegal equipment. Okay, next slide, Dave. And these are the bats. These are the specifications on the bats. You can see them there. There are max diameter and max lengths. It's a lot easier now to know which bat is legal. Majors and below, got to have the USA bat mark. Intermediate and juniors can be USA bat or BB Corps, and seniors has to be BB Corps. So those are the things you need to look for. It is a little confusing in the intermediate and juniors because you will see a USA bat, you will see BB Corps bats as well too, but they both are legal in the juniors and intermediate divisions. So in the notes down there, the non-wood bats, a metal bat has to have some sort of a grip tape on it. Wood bats do not. They're not required. They certainly can, but they do not have to. And I don't know why we put in the wood bat minimum diameter is 15/16. So I generally don't carry a pair of calipers on me to check that. But anyway, if the bat looks good, has a USA mark on it or the BB Corps mark, depending on the division, it's good to go. And so rule 2.0, that's the next section in the rule book. And these are the definition of terms. So we're going to touch upon some of them. It's a good place to start. It'll give you the definitions of what's an infield fly, what's obstruction, and things like that. And there certainly are other parts in the rule book that kind of take you to that. But this is kind of what defines some of the terms. So it's a good starting point to delve through the book. So let's talk about an at-bat. This has changed a little bit over the years, and now there's another change to it. But basically, an at-bat for the purpose of Little League's mandatory play requirement is when a batter assumes position in the batter's box with no count and completes that time at bat by being retired, scores, or the inning or game ends. The significant update, note 2 there, clarifies that when using the continuous batting order, players do not need to meet the running portion of mandatory play. That is a change. So if they get on base, they can be. I think they did that because you can use the courtesy runner. So I think that has something to do with that as well. But most of the time, they're going to run because there really is no substitutions as a traditional substitution as you would in bat 9. But basically, as a reminder, you don't have to. That's not part of meeting an at-bat. So it is an at-bat. Off to the right there, proper batter is called out under Rule 6.07, batting out of turn, or players called out for using a legal bat. Those are considered an at-bat. It is not an at-bat if a player is skipped over in a batting out of turn situation, or an improper batter with a count is replaced by a proper batter. Neither player will get an at-bat. Okay, next slide, Dave. So the base path. There's two considerations here. There is a difference between the base path and the baseline. So the baseline, and they're kind of used interchangeably, but they're really not. The baseline is basically what you see in the picture there, a foul line. So that's a baseline. It's a straight line between bases and home plate. The base path is established by the runner. And it's a straight line from which the runner to the base to which she is attempting to reach. So the runner establishes his or her own base path. So if there's not a play being made on a runner, um, they're free to run pretty much wherever they want to. They don't have to run in a straight line. They don't have to run from directly from base to base. If a runner wanted to from first base go all the way out to right field, touch the fence, and come back and go to second base, if there was no attempt to retire that runner, that would be perfectly legal. And it stands to reason too, because when kids hit extra base hit, we're not running in a direct straight line. They're rounding. So you have to understand that a base path is established by the runner, and that becomes a straight line when a tag attempt occurs. And that leads us to 7.0A1. And this is the runner's out when running more than 3 feet away from his or her base path to avoid being tagged, unless such action is to avoid interference with the fielder fielding a batted ball. So you can see there that it doesn't matter where they run, as long as a play is not being made on them. So they're free to run wherever they like. Okay. So a bunt. A bunt is a batted ball not swung at, but intentionally met with the bat and tapped slowly. A couple points of emphasis here. The mere holding of the bat in the strike zone is not an attempted bunt. So in baseball, in Little League Baseball, you can hold the bat in the strike zone throughout the entirety of the pitch, and it's not considered an attempt. That differs from Little League softball. Sometimes coaches will get confused or they've seen that rule somewhere else. In Little League softball, if the bat is held out there, then yes, that's considered a strike attempt. But if the batter holds the bat in the strike zone and the pitch ball does not enter the strike zone anywhere and is considered a ball, that mere act of holding the bat in the zone is not considered a strike. They must make some sort of motion towards the ball, make some sort of attempt to strike at the ball. Okay. So a catch. So there's going to be two distinctions here. There's a difference between a catch and a tag. And we'll talk about a tag later on. But there are two differences, and sometimes people will confuse them and kind of combine that. So a catch is basically a catch of a ball in flight, not a thrown ball. A thrown ball is more likened to a tag play. So a catch, when we talk about the act of a fielder getting secure possession in the hand or glove of a ball in flight means that it is his batted ball and firmly holding it before it touches the ground. So there's two criteria that you need to know as an umpire when establishing the validity of a catch. Is it has to be voluntary, it has firm possession, has to be voluntary and intentional release. Okay. So sometimes they'll have a secure catch, but they'll maybe run into the wall and that ball will pop out. That is not considered a voluntary and intentional release. So, but it can have, there's one caveat to that. If a fielder's running, they catch it and then they regain control of their momentum while maintaining a possession, that's considered a catch. And then obviously, if it's a third out, then they're probably not going to be throwing it in. So the voluntary release doesn't really come into play there. So, but the two things you need to know: secure possession on a catch of a ball in flight, which is basically a batted ball, and voluntary intentional release. And those are the two things. And what is not a catch? Possession lost prior to demonstrating control. So if they're falling down, the ball pops out, not considered a catch. If it deflects off an offensive player, a runner, umpire, or fence prior to gaining control, it is no longer considered in flight. So some of you may have remembered the Jose Canseco play. That's always one that we reference, where a fly ball hit off his head, went over the fence, and was ruled a home run. And that was, by definition, the right call. That is still considered a ball in flight because of that last bullet point there. It doesn't say deflecting off it can't deflect off a defensive player. So it can deflect off a defensive player, still be caught by that same person or another defensive player, as long as it doesn't touch the ground or some other object. Okay. Next slide.
Are you seeing it? Because we should be on fair ball now.
I'm sorry, I am seeing it.
Okay.
I should put my glasses on, I think. So this is a definition of a fair ball. So a fair ball, and as umpires and coaches, managers, and coaches alone need to know this as well. The definition of a fair ball. So a fair ball is a batted ball that settles on fair ground between home and first base. So that means or between home and third base. So I'm gonna parse these as we go. So a ball that settles between home plate and first base or between home and third base. So that is a ball that stops, that settles on the ground before the base is either third or first. Now that ball can zigzag back and forth across the foul line. It can enter foul territory. It can go back into fair territory, and it could zigzag along the line. It hasn't become a fair or foul ball at that point before the bag until where it settles. And if it settles in fair territory, which means stopped, that's a fair ball. And sometimes that causes some confusion of it kind of snaking around. And I've seen it happen before. Well, I think we've all seen it happen. And some people get confused and think, well, that's a foul ball because it started off. And even if it starts off foul, but veers into fair territory before the bag, that's considered a fair ball. So the next point is or that is on or over fair territory when bounding to the outfield past first or third base. Bounding means it's a bouncing ball. It has hit the ground before the bag, so it's bouncing, basically a grounder. So it's on or over fair territory when bounding to the outfield past first or third base. Basically, that means a ground ball that goes over the bag, first or third. Doesn't matter what happens before, doesn't matter what happens after it bounces over the bag. But if any part of that ball bounces over the bag, either first or third, that's a fair ball. Doesn't matter what happens before. It could have spin on it. It could bounce in foul territory right before the third base bag, pop up over the bag, and miraculously go foul again. Still a fair ball. It only matters the relative position of the ball with the foul lines. So that's another criteria. Or that touches first, second, or third base. That means any ball touches first, second, or third base, it's automatically a fair ball. Doesn't matter where it goes afterwards. You've probably seen it before. I've seen it many times. It hits the third base bag and goes foul and hits the fence. That's a fair ball. As soon as it hits the bag, first, second, or third, that's a fair ball. Or that first falls on fair territory on or beyond first base to third base. That is a fly ball that beyond first base to third base, it touches the ground in fair territory. Again, doesn't matter what happens after that, but if that ball touches past the bag on the line or in fair territory, that's a fair ball. Or that while on or over fair territory touches the person of an umpire or player, or that while over fair territory passes out of the playing field. So again, if a fielder touches it, no matter where it is in fair territory, if it's touched in fair territory relative to the foul line, the plane of the foul line, it's a fair ball. It's not like football where you could reach over with your feet in fair territory, catch the ball, and that becomes a legal ball, even though the ball is caught over the out of bounds area. That's not the case in baseball. Baseball is only relative to the position of so picture the foul lines of a big plane of glass going up on either side. If it's touched inside, it's fair. Touch outside, it's foul. And then the last point passes out of the playing field in flight. That's basically a home run. Again, the note there, fair fly shall be adjudged according to the relative position of the ball in the foul line. That's the only thing that matters. Okay, next slide. So force play. So force play is a lot of it's kind of misunderstood. It's used in other terms like when a runner is leaving early and they're going back, they often talk about he was forced out. That's not considered a force out. That's an appeal play. A force play, and this is going to come into play when we talk about the infield fly. A force play is a play in which a runner legally loses the right to occupy a base by reason of the batter becoming a runner. So that's what determines a force place. The batter becoming a runner, putting the ball in play. If the batter is out, no force play. If the batter gets a base hit safely, then it's force play. So that's what that means. That means if the batter becomes a runner, all other runners have to leave if they're forced to occupy the base. If the base if they're being forced by the batter runner. A couple of notes: you have to know that the force situation can be removed during the play. That's often you'll see that with runner on first and a ground ball to the first baseman. The runner on first takes off for second base, and the first baseman, instead of throwing to second base first, they'll step on the bag. So by retiring the batter runner, that means he's no longer a runner, so the force is off. So if they're throwing that ball to second base, that means that they have to tag the runner rather than tag the base. So you have to know, and that can happen in other situations as well too, that it can happen at other bases as well. The force can be removed. And I'll throw in a little caveat: the force can sometimes be instilled on a base, or what's the word I'm thinking for? The force can be put back in play on a missed base appeal, but that's kind of advanced, and we're not going to talk about that. And one of the exceptions to how a run scores is no runs may score when the third out is a force play. Okay, Dave. So foul tip. So one of the things I want to talk about a foul tip is, and this is kind of reminding me of the different rule sets. There's all sorts of different organizations of baseball, from little league all the way up to the pros. There's high school, there's travel ball. Everyone has slightly different rules. And so little league is very close to Major League Baseball rules. It's one of the closest rule sets to it, but they're not all the rule sets are not quite the same. And you have to know this as well too. So recently the foul tip in Major League Baseball was changed. It didn't have to go. Now in Major League Baseball, it doesn't have to go from the ball sharp and direct to the catcher's hands and then rebound. It's just as long as it's a foul tip, however the catcher catches it, that's going to consider a legally caught foul tip. So it's a batted ball that goes sharp and direct from the bat to the catcher's hands and is legally caught. Little League hasn't changed that. So sometimes what happens is people watch something and think the definition of a foul tip trickles down to Little League, and it's not always the case. Same thing with the first to third move on the big diamond. That's legal in Little League, but not legal in major leagues. So it's one of the reasons why we do this, is to show some of the differences and highlight those differences in the two different rule sets. So you have to know some of this stuff, and don't automatically assume because it's in the pros or you've seen it somewhere else, it's specific to Little League Baseball. So any foul tip that is caught is a strike. Any foul tip that is not caught is a foul ball. Foul tip that's caught, the ball is in play, runners may advance. So this is the distinction that they changed, the third bullet point there. It is not a catch if it is a rebound, unless the ball has first touched the catcher's glove or hand. So in order for it to be a legal foul tip in Little League Baseball, it has to be sharp and direct off the bat, has to hit the hand or glove, and then if it hits the player's chest protector, the catcher check protector, and then is caught, then that is a legal catch, and that's a foul tip. If it goes sharp and direct from the bat to the catcher's chest protector and then is caught, in Little League Baseball, that's not a legal cut. That's not a foul tip. That is just a plain old foul ball. And that differs from Major League Baseball now. And a foul tip can only be caught by the catcher, and if the third strike, the batter's out. One of the ones I want to highlight, a lot of times coaches don't understand this, is on a foul tip, the ball is in play. Runners may advance. So it's not a dead ball like a foul ball would be. Okay, Dave. So an illegal bat. So an illegal bat, this is the difference between illegal bats and damaged equipment. So an illegal bat is a bat that's been altered, or a bat that's not approved for play because it does not meet Little League specifications regarding length, weight, barrel dynamic, um, all that other stuff. So if you would see a BB core bat in T-ball, that would not be legal. That would be considered an illegal bat. If you were to see, and vice versa, if you see a USA baseball bat in senior division, that's not a legal bat. That's considered illegal equipment as well. But with that being said, um, there are some rule changes about checking equipment this year. We'll get into them later. But the manager is solely responsible for the legality of all the equipment. Okay. And also, the penalty has changed this year to be more consistent with tournament rules. Little League changed that. So if you're using a legal bat this year, if you're caught using a legal bat, no matter the circumstance, the player gets ejected and the manager gets ejected as well. So that's the new death sentence. So as an umpire, you can get the 2-for-1 special. Okay, next slide. So in flight, this is for a batted ball. A batted, thrown, or pitched ball, which has not yet touched the ground or some other object than a fielder, is a live ball. So it can be deflected off another defensive player. And if it is, the ball is still live no matter where it goes. Okay. Infield fly. So this can cause a lot of confusion, particularly at the lower levels, like the minors level. So one of the questions we always seem to get is the infield fly on in minors? And the answer is yes, it is. So as far as T-ball and and maybe some of your coach pitch divisions, technically speaking, yes, the infield fly is in play unless there's a local rule. But for those younger non-competitive divisions, we don't really care. I think the rule should be tailored to that level of play. But the infield fly, it's in all divisions and it doesn't change. So if an infield fly is a fair fly ball, and there's a caveat there, it's not including a line drive nor an attempted bunt, which can be caught by an infielder with ordinary effort, and when first and second or first, second, and third bases are occupied before 2 are out. 2 outs. So it's less than 2 outs, runners on first and second, or bases loaded. Those are the conditions for an infield fly. So what you need to know here is a couple of things. So the main point here is, could it have been caught by an infielder with ordinary effort? That's what you need to know. And that's what you need to decide as an umpire. And for the purpose of this rule, the infielders are catcher, pitcher, and the 4 middle infielders there, or the 4 infielders. So could one of them caught the ball with ordinary effort? It doesn't matter who catches the ball. There's no line of demarcation that says it has to be on the infield. It has to be, it can't be on the outfield grass. There's no consideration of that. So all it is, and you get to decide as an umpire, could it have been caught with ordinary effort? So what that means is, if the right fielder's playing shallow and comes in and calls off the second baseman who's camped under it and catches it, is that considered an infield fly? Well, yes, it could be. So it doesn't matter. An outfielder, the rule doesn't say an outfielder can't catch it. It only says, hypothetically, can an infielder catch it with ordinary effort? And if so, that's considered an infield fly. One thing you need to know about an infield fly is, when an infield fly is declared, the force is off. Why? Because the batter runner is called out. So it doesn't matter what happens after that, and it does cause some confusion, especially if the ball is dropped or hits the ground. There's no force plays, so there's only going to be tag plays on that. And runners may advance in jeopardy of being put out. If the ball is caught, they're still subject to the retouch requirements. But if the ball is dropped, again, there's no force and they can go on their own. You also have to consider the variables, especially the division that you're umpiring in. So if you're in the minors division, what's ordinary effort going to be as compared to the seniors that are 15 and 16-year-olds. So the level of play does come into play, basically minors and even sometimes majors. Um, Maybe they need to be sort of camped out. They're not going to move that much, but other divisions, those kids can move quite a bit. And if you deem that it's ordinary effort, well, then call the infield fly. The idea is to don't give the defense a cheap double play because a fly on the infield, the runners are going to have to hold. So that's really what it is, just to protect against a cheap double play. Um, you can correct it. Umpires can't correct it. It's better to call it. But the teams must know the rules of the situation. That's a little bit of a bone of contention, though. They put that caveat in there, I think, for us. But teams must know the rules. Well, it's tough to decide if, as an offensive player, is that if it's not called, do you have to decide for yourself that it's an infield fly or not? So it's a little tough. So I encourage umpires to really work at this. That it is important, and it's important distinction to make that call, because even though we have that umpires have that get out of jail free card, if we don't call it, we can correct it, but we really do need to do our best to make that call so people are understanding of the rule. Okay, next
All
slide.
right. John, we actually have a video here. I don't know if you
Oh
saw
yes, I
this
forgot
one.
about the video. Let's see it.
This is not only an infield fly, but there's some really funky stuff going on in this play.
Washington has yet to lead in this.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Am I sharing audio? I probably am not. Let me stop and reshare.
I heard the audio.
Yeah, you heard it through my mic, but it's probably better if I share it this way. All right, let me back this up.
Washington has yet to lead in this game, but they've come back in 2 innings down to tie it twice. As catch made just outside the infield.
Raleigh Jennings dropped it on purpose, actually.
Yeah, he did. And I was about to say, Jess, that I'm surprised that they're not calling it infield fly, because it wasn't that far out of the infield. And Jennings dropped it on purpose.
So we're not going to watch the whole thing. It's a little bit long video clip, but we have both an infield fly and an intentionally dropped ball. And John, you want to pick it up from there?
Okay, so I happen to be going over the infield fly earlier. I have not seen the video, but I do have the rules instruction manual here. So in that particular play, I believe that was actually a Western Region last year, wasn't it, Dave?
It was, yes.
It was Western Region there. So that was what, runners on first and second?
Yes.
I think it was runners on first and second. So me personally, I would have had an infield fly on that. I think if I was at the game, I would think I would call infield fly on that. I don't think there's any correction about that. So the question comes in, does an intentionally dropped ball come into play on an infield fly? So remember that, because on an infield fly, the batter's out. Okay. So the batter is out no matter what, whether the ball is caught or not. So if I remember correctly, the intentionally dropped ball doesn't count in this situation. I'll have to look up the site for you, but I thought I ran across that here. I don't want to read it. I'll tell you what, Dave is speaking. I will look that up. But Dave, are you in agreement with that? I believe that's the rule.
Yeah, so there's a tricky situation, right? Because now there is a rule for an intentionally dropped ball. So if it wasn't an infield fly and it was an intentionally dropped ball, then we would have an out under a different ruling, and it would be effectively the same as an infield fly. But the
Correct.
fact that the shortstop tricked R2 into running after they dropped it and then tagged him would have created an out regardless there.
Yeah, so if it was infield fly, the batter runner's out, and I believe I'd have to look up the site, but if it wasn't called declared an infield fly and the shortstop dropped it like that, I don't believe there's a penalty because I believe there's an exception for that. It doesn't count on an infield fly. So, however, if it was not called an infield fly, and it was that would be considered an intentionally dropped ball, and then you call time and you call the batter runner out, and the runners, put the runners back at their bases time of pitch. So, but I'll look that up. I believe that's what it is in that particular play. I don't know what. Did you watch the whole video, Dave? Did they? Did
Yeah,
they?
we could go
what was
through the whole we could go through the
what
whole thing, but
was?
I think it just takes a little bit too much time. Um,
Yeah. What was?
ultimately, well, why don't we just watch
Chicken
it
has
and
yet
I'll
to
just advance it
lead.
to the very end. So they had a long explanation, and then I believe the commentators.
Just let it drop.
Let it drop. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this case here, I think the result was
It's a great
one
effort
out.
by Jennings, though. I mean, kudos to him.
The shortstop
Would have
wanted
gotten him out
two.
of the inning.
So you can see he's signaling
Actually,
two
no,
outs,
it would
two
have
outs.
just gotten
And
them two
he
outs.
can't believe why
eliminated
there's no 2 outs on the board.
2 runners in the process.
Instead, it's just 1 out. Runners at first and second. And Brant Schopiker coming to the plate.
All right, now I'm going to stop my share and reshare it without the streaming option. And we'll go on to the next slide. Or is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, John?
No, like I said, when you're doing your presentation, I'll look that up and we'll revisit that at the end. I'll bring that back up, but I'm pretty sure on that particular play, that other out would stand, but I'll have to look up the rule side on that. So anyway, interesting play. So there's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen. That's a good, high level of baseball there too. That's a regional, but even at that level, there's some screwy things that can happen. And some of those kids are pretty savvy. So let's talk about a play. A play or attempted play is interpreted as a legitimate effort by a defensive player who has possession of the ball to retire a runner. So you kind of need to know this as umpires. This really comes into play, no pun intended, on an appeal play. So you need to know what that is. So because sometimes the appeal can be erased or the defense have lost their right to appeal if there's another intervening play. So a play is attempted to tag a runner, a fielder running towards the base with the ball to force to tag a runner, throwing to a defensive player to retire a runner, a blocker, and a legal pitch. Those are all considered plays. A fake or a feint is not a play. And believe it or not, you do not have to step off the rubber to make an appeal play as a pitcher. You don't have to legally disengage. You can just step and throw to a base. So that one causes a lot of confusion. You'll see that sometimes, mostly on the big diamond, where they think they've committed a balk there, but that's not the case. And for Little League Baseball, if you're going to have an appeal play, it must be a live ball. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the strike zone. This one's, always causes a lot of debate, exactly what the strike zone is. So let's talk about the theory of the strike zone as defined in the Little League rule book or defined in a lot of rule books, and the reality of what the strike zone should be. So according to Little League baseball, it's the batter's armpits and the top of the knees, and it's the width of the plate, which is 17 inches. Okay. So the reality of that is we're not calling that strike zone like that. I mean, sometimes we are, especially in minors, which is bigger. But we're not, the reality of it is we're not calling that strike zone, and that's not the strike zone that Little League wants us to call. So you have a rule book definition of a strike zone, but in practice, it really becomes a little bit different. So the strike zone, however, the strike zone is always over home plate, regardless of where the batter stands. So we use the plate as kind of a design. kind of a guide is where the strike zone is. Every umpire is a little bit different. We try to standardize as much as we can, but the reality of it is every umpire has a slightly different strike zone or sees the ball a little bit differently. So the one thing you have to know is the batter strike zone is when the batter's in the batter's usual stance when they swing at a pitch. So sometimes kids will try to crouch down to make it look like the strike zone is smaller, but it's their natural batting stance when they swing at the ball. So let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about the reality of the strike zone. So on the left is the MLB strike zone, okay? Which is obviously we're not going to call an MLB zone, but it's actually top and bottom. It's probably a good zone for what we're doing. I generally try to say just below the elbows is a good starting point, about the top of the zone, and the bottom of the knees. If you can see, contrast that to the Little League Baseball strike zone, which is a little bit higher, which you can go higher if you want to. And I would go lower too. I like the bottom of the knees. I think the Little League strike zone as described in the rule book is maybe a little bit too small. I think it should go to the bottom of the knees. I think anything at the knees is a good pitch. And I don't think anyone would argue with that, batters or pitchers or coaches alike. The challenges come in the width of the zone. If you're going to call the zone that the ball has to hit the plate, touch the lines of the plate somewhere, you're going to be in for a long game at most levels, to be honest with you, up into the high school level. So we're instructed to call off the plate a little bit, and we teach that. Little League Baseball teaches that's what they want. So you may have heard the term, they want us to call the river or the channel. So it's kind of that zone where the chalk line is, the batter's box chalk line close to the plate, that zone between the chalk line, that little space of dirt right there. We call it the channel or the river. So Little League calls it the river. So on the inside pitches, we instruct people to call one ball length off the plate in the zone, and the outside should be a ball, maybe two on the outside part of the plate. So that's going to increase that plate to 24, 27 inches, something like that. And that's really realistically what Little League wants to call this, what you should be calling. Okay. So I think of it, and I explained this at some of you may have been at the mechanics clinic. I kind of describe the strike zone as being more egg-shaped. So I think the lower pitches you're more apt to call a little bit outside and a little bit more inside, as opposed to the higher you get, it needs to be a little bit more over the plate. But you do have to remember that the plate is three-dimensional. The strike zone doesn't start at the top of or the front edge of the plate. It's a three-dimensional box. So theoretically, if it would clip any part of that corner, that would be a strike. So calling balls and strikes is difficult to do, especially in Little League Baseball, because we're dealing with a lot of novice umpires, and it's the starting point for a lot of umpires. We have a lot of good umpires, but there are struggles sometimes with that. But that's what we try to teach, and we try to teach the proper way to call balls and strikes, but it's a long process. It takes basically years to master calling a consistent zone. So that's what, so I think the MLB strike zone there, a little bit wider, maybe just a little bit taller, is a pretty good guide to go by. And that's again, that's what Little League instructs that. They'll instruct that at their week-long clinics, and all their instructions. They want us to call one ball on the inside off the plate and about a ball and a half two. The reality is we're probably calling twos, on the outside. Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is the second part of what we talked about, a tag versus a catch. So this is on a tag play, we're really talking about a thrown ball. So a thrown ball that is caught by a fielder. So A tag is the action of a fielder touching a base with the body while holding the ball securely in the hand or glove, or touching a runner with the ball, or with the hand or glove holding the ball. So in this situation, we really just need secure possession. There is no condition of voluntary release on that on a tag play. So we don't have to have voluntary release. We just need to have secure possession throughout the entirety of the tag play. So if a runner's stealing and there's a throw down to second base and the fielder puts the ball down and the runner slides into the glove and would otherwise, before they hit the bag, would otherwise be out, but knocks the ball out, we would not consider that secure possession. Okay. So you got to make sure that when you're judging that on a tag, the validity of a tag, that it's secure possession throughout the entirety of the tag. Okay. Okay, here's one that changed recently. I think it was last year, I believe so, that it came out that managers and coaches are permitted to warm up a pitcher games or anywhere else. And they also, I like that they also put in this this condition that they may also stand by to observe a pitcher during a warm-up in the bullpen. I'm glad they clarified that, because we would get questions about that all the time, and some umpires would rule that the manager couldn't stand there in the bullpen. Now, that brings us to the question of, can the manager stand by the pitcher on the mound if they are warming up? If the pitcher is warming up, say you brought in a new pitcher, did a pitching change in the middle of the game, can the manager stand by there? Okay, it's not specifically covered in the rule book, but yes, the manager can stand there. We see this a lot where people say, you can't stand there. Look, as long as the manager is not holding up the game, not delaying the game, time is called, they're warming up, they're going to get their 8 pitches or whatever, however many they want. It's perfectly fine for the manager to stand there. So that's 309. So 313 is talking about established ground rules to be followed by all teams in the league. So a local league can establish ground rules depending on some things that are not specifically covered in the rule book. So you may have a tree that hangs over. So a league can have certain ground rules specific to their field. It cannot be contrary to Little League rules, but some fields, obviously, there's nothing about trees or sometimes netting that goes up. A good example of that is Choyas Lake Little League used to have, I think they probably still do, they had a fence to protect their T-ball field. So they had a couple different rules of whether it bounced and hit the net and came back in. And I don't remember what it was. I haven't upped it at Joyous Lake in a while. But, if it bounced back in, it was considered, over the fence or something like that. But anyway, they had specific ground rules for that. And they have to be written down. You can't just say, well, this is, the league can't say, well, that's how we do it. They have to be specific ground rules that are written that everyone can see. Otherwise, it's going to be up to the discretion of the umpire to establish ground rules. But the important thing is leagues cannot have ground rules that are contrary to the rule book. So you can't say that, a ground rule double is 3 bases because that's the way we want it here at this field. No, you can't do stuff like that. Okay. Okay, so we got some Q&A. Let's take a little break here and see what's going on in the chat room. Let me see if I can pull this up on mine.
I can read it off to you if you want me to, or do you have your chat open?
I have it right here. So our first question was, does a laminated wood bat such as a bamboo wood bat require a USA or B McCormick to be legal? Yes, it does, because it's not considered a single piece of wood, a smooth round stick or whatever it says. So you'll see laminated wood bats and bamboos. They're not a solid piece. So they would have to have that mark for that. And then Stephen, I believe that came from Ken, and Stephen from Choice Lake is the batter got hit hard by the pitcher last inning. He was scared to bat again against the same pitcher. There was a lot of emotion from the batter. The coach wanted him not to bat. Is that an out or considered an injury? And we keep the order going. Okay, so that's a good question. So that depends. That question depends on if you're doing continuous batting order or not, which you probably should be. It's pretty much the standard now in Little League. I don't think we'll see too much of bat nine anymore, especially that the tournament has gone to continuous batting order. So in that situation there, if you look at the rule of the continuous batting order, if a player can't continue or doesn't want to play for whatever reason, injury, feeling ill, doesn't want to, had a bad day, whatever, you can remove them from play, either batting or in the field, without penalty. Okay, that's specific to the rule book there. So in that situation, you just skip over them. There's no penalty. There's no out. There's no anything. If they want to not continue for the rest of the game, you still skip over them as many times as need be, and that's fine. If they want to come back in for whatever reason, they feel like they're coming back in, you just put them back in. And that's a continuous batting order. Now, if you were batting nine with the substitution rules, that would be a little bit different. You would have to substitute for them. But I believe everyone here does continuous batting order. So in that situation, I don't know what rule that is. Is it 314 or I don't know, 314 or 4 something. It's either in the 3 or 4 section there, talking about continuous batting order. I don't know. But anyway. And then Stephen, your second question is, are penalties must-dos or can-dos? So I'm not sure about that. Penalties. So if you want to unmute yourself, you can go
Yeah,
ahead and ask a question on that.
that was like related to your saying the illegal bat. You said the umpire could eject the batter and the manager. Now, would we have to do that? Could we just say that that batter is out, or do you have to like eject people like that?
So the rule says if a batter steps in the box with both feet in the batter's box, and it's discovered at that time it's discovered yes. So and also there's kind of two conditions to that. So if they step into the box with an illegal bat, not a damaged bat, but remember illegal equipment, then yes. And if it's discovered that after maybe that kid gets on base or something like that, and you discover the bat, then I believe that it's an out as well too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I believe that runner's out or the batter's out, and then gets ejected and the manager too. So yes, most of your penalties prescribed in the rule book, yes, you do have to follow them. Umpires have a little bit of discretion sometimes, but if there's a penalty, there's a penalty, and it's enforced.
There, John, I'll just say that there are some times, especially in the fall, but also sometimes in the beginning of the regular season, where we might waive certain penalties. The Bach rule comes to mind, like there maybe we're just going to be a little lax on enforcing the Bach while this is an instructional period. So, as John mentioned, that we have some discretion, but really we're supposed to enforce the penalties.
Yeah. And sometimes, if you're having scrimmage games or something like that, and the manager or the league agrees that they're going to give balk warnings, I'm not a fan of that, but some leagues do that early on in the season. If that's what the league wants to do and everyone agrees to it, then yeah, we're just going to kind of turn a blind eye and just kind of do what the league wants to. But certainly, during a regular season or any tournament games, we're going to enforce the rules as written. And sometimes there is a leeway. Sometimes managers have for catcher's interference, or excuse me, for catcher's interference or an illegal pitch. The manager has an option. For box, managers don't have an option to take it. We either enforce it or we don't, depending on the situation. So yes, penalties are there. The rule book is there. and we've got to enforce the rules.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. And then Mark asks, should umpires have a brief meeting with both managers before the game to discuss what their strike zone is? No, 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 and no. Never do that. And if a coach asks you, hey, Blue, first of all, they should be calling you by their first name. But if the coach says, hey, Blue, what's your strike zone like? I'm not as forgiving as that. A good answer is, hey, it's by the book or whatever. I've been around a while, so if someone asks me that, they don't get that polite of an answer. They basically get, don't ever ask me that, and you should know better than that. So we don't discuss our strike zone at all. And managers need to know that, because what do you say? What do you say? Oh, it's the size of a refrigerator. I feel like opening it up today. I mean, what do you say? Oh, I call 6 balls off the plate. I mean, there's no good answer to that. You call it the best you can for the level that you're working and try to be as consistent as fair as possible. That's what you're striving for. So anyone that tries to ask you what your strike zone is, I can guarantee you they're more than likely trying to work you and trying to gain some sort of an advantage as a manager. So it should not be discussed. Okay. And then what do we got here? We got a couple more. Let me see if I got to scroll down here. So the rule for the intentional, Justin, the rule for the intentional drop ball is 605K. So if you look at the AR in this situation, the batter is not out if the infielder permits the ball to drop untouched to the ground, except when the infield fly rule applies. So I think there's in the rim, there's an explanation of that, but I believe I'm correct about that the batter can, or the fielder can, in an infield fly situation, can intentionally drop the ball because the penalty is already there. The batter's out. So I believe that's what it is. Let's see. Corey, we have one last question. I have had to educate families on opposition chanting during a pitcher's delivery. There's not a rule on this, as I understand, as long as they don't use noisemaker, rattle fences, bang on objects, and obviously not attack the pitcher. They have a right to cheer loud and all the way through a delivery. Okay. So that's talking about chanting when the pitcher's in his windup or something like that. Man, that causes problems. I don't know why, it just does. So yeah, there's no specific ruling on that. Obviously, you can't, players and coaches and stuff like that can't entice a blocker or an illegal pitch and stuff like that. Little League has some sort of direction on that. I believe they have offered some sort of guidance that they want. What they don't want is the crescendo to get higher as the pitcher starts his delivery. So they don't want any deliberate distractions of that, trying to cause the pitcher an illegal pitch or something like that. But yeah, if they're cheering throughout that and they're being respectful and polite, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. But what we listen for as umpires is the level getting higher, as soon as they're screaming or quick yell or something like that, right when the pitcher's giving his delivery, trying to distract them. So Little League doesn't like it, but as far as I know, there's not a whole lot of guidance on that in that. Dave, if you want to weigh in on that, if you got other feelings about that.
Yeah, there is a little clarification on the Little League website, and if I can find it super quick, I'll bring it up.
Okay. So anyway, yes, and let me tell you that sometimes those little things in a game really set some coaches off, about that, and so it can be very frustrating, and it does become bickering, and yeah, it does cause problems. I personally, I wish it would just end and they wouldn't say anything, but they're allowed to cheer. And as long as they're doing it respectfully, there's no rule that says, hey, you need to shut up as soon as the pitcher's in his windup, So, those things unfortunately, at the higher levels, those things kind of take care of themselves, by various means. But at Little League level, it kind of. So,
All right, you should be
Jonathan
able to see
Dave, I
this now.
raised my hand on that thing.
oh, yeah,
What
Greg, go
about
ahead.
walk up? What about walk up songs? There's been
Okay.
issues within Lake Murray on playing walk up songs too long, and it's just a nuisance.
Okay, let me answer this and I'll answer that one. Okay, Greg. Anyway, here's some guidance from that. Uh, See, the ability for a team to cheer for their batter runner should not be restricted. Again, basically, it's got to be polite. It's got to be respectful. They can't be, trying to signal someone out. But they can cheer, but you also got to watch. You can't. The other team can't cause the pitcher to balk or throw an illegal pitch, and that's where they talk about the crescendo or shrieking. They don't like that, so they do outlaw artificial noise makers. So that's in there. So you have that, but it's sometimes it's kind of a tough thing to enforce in games. Especially tight games, and sometimes people get hot. So you have a little bit of rule there. You can shut it down. Now, one of the things I'm just going to tell you is sometimes you can get away with shutting it down because people don't know the difference. They don't know that you really don't have the rule support for that. But it's a lot of it to do is with game management, and that's one of the part. People can be very good ball strike technicians and really good calling safes and outs, but there's a whole nother part to umpiring, and that's game management. And we see a lot of good umpires can't master the game management or have poor game management skills. And they never really can advance because of that. You can be really good calling balls and strikes, safes, outs, but because they just can't handle what's going on, manage what's going on the field. So it's a big portion of learning how to umpire. And that comes with a lot of experience and training. That's just the way it is. So, Greg, your question was about walk-up songs. Again, nothing in the rule book other than it's being distracted. Really, that's more of a league issue. Does your league allow it? I think that's something your board of directors should take care of. That's something that should be addressed and have a clear policy on that. As an umpire, I've told them that's happened before. I tell the scorekeeper, whoever's doing it, if it's going on too long, I mean, it should stop when he's getting in the box, basically, And if it's going on longer than that, yeah, I'm probably going to put a stop to that. I'm just going to say, and if they want to abuse it, I'm just going to say no music, and we have our ways as umpires of enforcing that. Okay, let's see. So we talked about 406C. We got another question from Steven. Do we ever judge based on an injury? It was full count. The batter did a check swing and went for a swing, but got hit really hard by the pitch. The crowd on both sides gasped. I saw the batter swing, but because he got injured, I gave him first base. Okay.
Hey,
It
John.
depends on the level. I can tell you that. So basically, the kid swung, he got hit by the pitch, and it sucked. So yeah, I remember clearly I did that at a Caps game one of my first years of umpiring. I did that at a Caps game. I felt bad for the kid, and the manager came out and actually argued it that he swung, and I go, he got hit, whatever. Truth be told, it was a long time ago. I didn't really know the rules. I just thought, poor kid, he should get first base. So, but technically speaking, no, it's just sorry. If that's a third strike and it hit him, the ball is dead because it hit him. That's it. If it's a lower division and maybe it's a scrimmage game or something like that, but no, the rule is that if he swings at the ball and it hits him, it's a dead ball. It's a strikeout. It's a dead ball strike. And if it's a third strike, he's out.
We have a couple of case plays on this later,
Okay.
and a couple of videos on both directions where our audience gets to make the call.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, good questions. Let's move on. Okay, we're going to talk about interference and obstruction. In practice, in most people's eyes, they're basically the same thing, interference. But in the rule book, they're called two different things. So both managers, coaches, and umpires need to know the difference between interference and obstruction. So basically, the offense, the runner typically, the offense will interfere with the fielder doing his job. So that's basically what it is. So the offense is going to interfere with the fielder doing his job. Obstruction is the fielder interfering with the runner doing his job. So there's two different distinctions on that. There are some exceptions to that, though, in terms of the wording, but that's basically it. And I can tell you this is a misunderstood. A lot of both obstruction and interference are misunderstood. They're often misapplied. They're hard calls to make. You have to see them sometimes, and a lot of times you're not sure what happened. So it's a difficult call for umpires and especially novice umpires to make as well too. But there is a difference between interference and obstruction. So we talk about the offense has a right to the base path on a thrown ball. So basically, if the runner's going to interfere with a thrown ball, it has to be deliberate. So, and that the reason why that rule is there, so you couldn't just plunk the runner anytime you wanted to if you didn't think you were going to get him out. So that's it. So on a thrown ball, the offense it has basically the right of way. On a batted ball, the defense has the right of way. So on a batted ball, the fielder has the right of way, and sometimes the runner has to disappear, even though they can't. But that's the rule. So the defense has the fielder has an absolute right to a batted ball. Okay. So there's some different kinds of interference obstruction here. So you're going to have offensive interference here. You can see how many rules it's covered there. It's all different variations of it are spelled out in all those sections of the rule book. You have coach's interference, and that's a physical assistant. It has to be a physical assistant in the runner leaving or returning first base. Coach's interference can also be with a batted ball if they get in the way of maybe a fly ball in foul territory. So there's that part of it as well. So you have defensive interference, preventing or hindering the batter from hitting a pitch. It's catcher's interference is what it's called. You have umpire's interference. There's only two times you can have umpire's interference. There's no other time that you can have. It's spelled out very cut and dry, that umpire's interference. So one is the plate umpire hindering or impeding a catcher's throw on a stolen base attempt. Okay, so typically that would be the catcher rearing back and hitting the umpire. And so that would be a form of umpire interference. The second one you see is a batted ball touch an umpire in fair territory before passing a fielder. You will almost never see this on the small diamond because the umpires are always behind the infielders. But you'll see it sometimes on the big diamond. And those are the only two instances. You'll see it sometimes. There was a play, I think, last year in one of the College World Series, or maybe the year before, where a runner ran into the umpire coming in. He was coming in to do his pivot, and he ran into it. That's not umpire interference. That's just, sorry, too bad. And then there's spectator interference, reaching on the playing field or coming onto the field. Okay. This is another one that is really, really tough, runner's lane violation. So first of all, most of the fields that we work at, they don't chalk the runner's lane, so you don't know where it is. But there's a lane that's a halfway to first base, the last half of first base. So it's either 30 feet on the small diamond or 45 feet on the big diamond. And I believe it's 30 inches wide on the small diamond and 36 inches wide on the big diamond. So in this particular play, runner's lane violation, it only comes into play from a throw originating around home plate. Okay, and it's designed to protect the fielder taking the throw, the first baseman. So you won't see runner's lane violation on a straight hit to shortstop or third base or something like that. Certainly the third baseman, if he's crashing, he can be involved in that. But most of your routine ground balls to the outfielders playing in their relative normal positions, runner's lane violation won't come into play. This is only balls kind of around the plate. Okay. So batters out when running the last half of the distance from home base to first base. So while the ball is being fielded at first base, the batter runner runs, and this is where the confusion comes. The batter runner runs outside the running lane, so to the right of. So that's basically in foul territory, or inside the runner's lane, which is a little counterintuitive because you think inside, I'm inside the runner's lane. No, that's called within the runner's lane. So inside to the left, so basically in fair territory. So, and they interfere with the fielder taking the throw. So you see this on a bunt or sometimes a swinging bunt, a little squib in front of the plate or something like that, where the catcher has to kind of position. So, so they have to be, their feet have to be entirely within the runner's lane for the last half. Okay, they can come. They're basically going to start, especially a right-handed batter is going to start way out, but they're supposed to make their way into the runner's lane, and their feet has to be within the runner's lane. So the runner's lane and the lines of the runner's lane are completely within. So if their feet are on the line, then that's legal. They're considered within the runner's lane. So a couple conditions here. The ball must be thrown. You can't have runner's lane violation without a thrown ball. So the ball has to be thrown, and it has to be what's called a quality throw, or must be catchable by the first baseman. If it's airmailed over his head, it really doesn't matter where the runner was, with regards to the runner's lane violation. So this one's a tough call to make, and it does cause a lot of confusions on that.
John, we have a video on this.
All right.
And also at West Region, they clarified that if the runner's lane is not marked, then we are not to call any violation.
I, of course, disagree with that, but that's what Little League wants. Yeah, it's up to you.
This video shows a violation of Rule 6.05, paragraph J, or a runner's lane violation. Notice that the batter runner has reached the point where the runner's lane begins. The batter runner is clearly outside of the lane. The catcher's throw strikes the batter runner. The umpire immediately calls time, rules the batter runner out for interference.
Time! Time! That's interference! 30! You're out!
The ball is dead, and no other runners may advance. In order to make this call, all of the following must be present. 1. A marked runner's lane. 2. The throw comes from behind the batter runner. 3. The defense must throw the ball. And 4. It must be a reasonably catchable throw. It is the ability of the defense to catch the throw that is being interfered with, not the throw itself. For more information on these and other rules, please visit littleleague.org/universe.
So on that video there, I don't care if there's another line on the outside in foul territory. You can clearly see there that the runner has violated the rule. So if it's kind of a gray area, then yeah, I wouldn't call it. But on that particular play, he's clearly out of the lane. The missing the right hand of the right part of the runner's lane there is just not in my, I mean, you can just tell. So I wouldn't, just by virtue of it not being chalked, I don't think I'd throw that out the window. I think you can still call it sometimes. Okay. So interference by a runner. So this causes a little bit of confusion sometimes as well. But so we're going to try to clarify that. It's interference by a batter or runner when a batter or runner who has just been retired hinders or impedes any following play being made on a runner. Usually you'll see this on a double play as illustrated in the picture there. And the runner shall be declared out for the interference of teammate. So you can get the 2-for-1 special on this one, regardless if there's a play at first base or not. So a couple things you need to know. In Little League, a legal slide is as long as they can reach the base with a hand or foot. Okay. They can't veer into the runner, purposely veer into the runner, or excuse me, into the fielder or slide beyond the base. Okay, so you need to clarify that about sliding beyond the base. They absolutely can slide beyond the base, but what they can't do is slide beyond the base and make contact with the fielder. Okay. Don't call them out just because they've slid past the base. If that fielder was in that position you see in the picture and the runner slid past the base, where would there be a violation there? So we do have to add that clarification on that. So another thing you need to know is there's no must slide rule in Little League. Okay. But you can't, in this particular play, you just can't interfere. So whatever that's going to be. So you as an umpire, you have to decide, was the slide legal? And if he didn't slide, did he interfere? Did he run into the runner or the fielder? So you get to decide on that. And then in that particular play, if you think there's interference from an already retired runner, you can call the batter runner out as well too. So the 2-for-1 special. I don't know that I've ever called that. So, but someday maybe. So, okay. Next slide, please, Dave. So it's interference by a batter runner when the runner fails to avoid a fielder who is attempting to field a batted ball or intentionally interferes with the thrown ball. Remember, we talked about that. So if you interfere, again, the fielder has an absolute right to field a batted ball, not a thrown ball, but a batted ball. Or they have to intentionally interfere. I think this play here was the Angels, where he stuck his head out a couple years ago, and that was on a thrown ball. He did that on purpose, and he was rightfully called out. That was a good call right there. So for interfering with a fielder on a batted ball, it can be intentional or unintentional. It doesn't matter. He cannot interfere. But on a thrown ball, it's got to be It's got to be intentional, like they're waving their arms or they move their body into the throw or something like that. Also, on our little point of emphasis there, sometimes on a batted ball, you'll have two fielders trying to field that ball. You have to decide as an umpire which one gets the benefit of the protection. Which one do you think is going to field the ball? Which one has a better chance to field the ball? So one of them is going to be protected against interference, but the other fielder could be guilty of obstruction if they're not the ones that are fielding the ball. And one last point, contact is not necessary for interference to be called. Coach's interference, we have this all the time. We talk about this a lot. It does happen. Basically, on coach's interference, it's physical assistance. It has to be physical assistance. They have to touch the runner, and they have to help the runner achieve their objective, either leaving the base or coming back to the base. But remember, it has to be physical. A high five is not interference. We've seen that before, where umpires have called people out on a home run or something like that, where they high five the third base coach. That is not considered coach's interference because they haven't helped them achieve their objective, okay, physically. So a couple things. If a play is being made on the assisted runner, the runner's out, and it's going to be a dead ball. You're going to call time, the runner's out, and you're going to return all runners to the bases occupied at the time of the interference. If no play is being made on the assisted runner, you just call them out and the ball remains live. The reason why, if there's no play being made on the assisted runner, we don't want to deny the defense a chance to make a play on another runner. So you see, I believe we have a video on this one.
We do, yep. Let me reshare
And
this.
I believe this is our friend George Rodriguez, isn't it?
It is.
This is a few years ago at West Region. George just did the World Series last year in Williamsport. So that's George Rodriguez. He's up in the LA area. So watch the third base.
So now he tapped his runner. He touched his runner and moved him towards the plate. And that's the reason the call was made by the third base umpire, George Rodriguez. Had he verbally just told him to go, it looked like play was live. And that would have been the tying run.
You're absolutely right, Niels. Time had not been called. You can see the umpire standing behind third base, waiting patiently for something like this to happen. And you see here the coach inciting him verbally. He doesn't get the message, and then you see the physical prompt. And that's exactly what cannot happen. There cannot be physical contact between any member of the...
And that ended the game. And that was at West Region up in San Bernardino. But it was absolutely the right call. And you could see he was right there and saw it. And that was a textbook on how to make that call. Okay, next slide, Dave.
It's not advancing. Hold on. There we go.
So again, more interference by a runner. It's interference by a batter or runner when a fair ball touches the batter or runner in fair territory before touching a fielder. So a couple things on this one. So that's basically a batted ball. So if batted ball hits the runner, there are a couple exceptions, but pretty much if a batted ball hits the runner, unless the ball has gone on or through the fielder in the general vicinity there, generally speaking, if a batted ball hits a runner, they're going to be called out. And one condition you have to know is the base is not a sanctuary. If they're standing on the base and they get hit by a batted ball, for instance, a ground ball, that's an out. The base is not a sanctuary. So the only exception is on an infield fly, because they're not, they can't really move they can't really move on that and get it out of the way. And plus, on an infield fly, the batter runner's out, so it doesn't really matter if the fielder catches the ball or not. But remember, the base is not a sanctuary on a batted ball. Catcher's interference. So this one you'll see quite a bit, especially at the younger levels. Mostly you'll see it on a swing where it hits a catcher's glove. But if the catcher interferes with the batter, it's a delayed dead ball. If the ball is put in play, you let it go. And if the third bullet point there, if the batter runner and all runners advance one base safely, then we just don't even make mention of the interference. There's no manager's option. But if you do have to enforce it, if the ball isn't put in play, or if it's put in play and maybe the batter runner doesn't reach first base safely, there is an option. There are some scenarios where maybe a run could score on that particular play, and you want to take the offensive manager wants to take the results of the play. He has that option on catcher's interference. So basically, if the ball's put in play and everybody advances at least one base safely, then we make no mention of the catcher's interference you play on. Otherwise, we have to enforce the penalty, which is the batter runner gets first base, and that's it. And so, but sometimes there is an option on that. And so if he wants to take that option, he's more than, sometimes you want to trade a run for an out. So you do have that. On a balk, we'll talk about it later. There's no option on a balk. Okay, umpire interference, we talked about that. Plate umpire interferes with the catcher throwing. If he retires a runner trying to steal, then no interference. If not, you just send the runners back. That's all. It's kind of a do-over. Again, if a fair ball touches a runner, umpire on fair territory, you'll only see this on the big diamond when the umpire's playing in. So basically, it becomes an immediate dead ball. And you put the runner at first base, and the other runners can advance as long as they're forced to advance. That's it. So you can have some scenarios where there's been some scenarios where the game has ended on those particular play. Base is loaded, and you get a ground ball, and it hits the umpire. The batter runner gets first base, and that advances all the runners, and the run scores. So those are the only two scenarios. Like I said, on the small diamond, you almost never see it because the field umpire is always playing behind. And on another one, it's not really umpire's interference, but it's a one base award if a pitch ball lodges in the catcher's or umpire's mask or paraphernalia. The runners advance one base. So it's not just a note there. It's not an interference when a fair ball after having passed by a fielder other than a pitcher or having been touched by a fielder, including the pitcher. So if that's an umpire or runner in fair territory. So basically, if it touches a fielder and then hits the umpire, it's a live ball. We're not going to kill it, and that would be the base umpire. Okay. So obstruction. So this is the second part of it, obstruction. So we have interference, now we have obstruction. So obstruction is the act of a fielder while not in possession of the ball impedes the progress of any runner. Okay. So you have to go back to 2.0 and look at the definition of obstruction. And it's kind of specific to Little League in high school too, but it's the act of the fielder while not in possession of the ball. That's the only criteria. If the fielder is going to obstruct the runner, they have to have possession of the ball. There is no in the act of fielding provision in the definition of obstruction in Little League Baseball. So you can't say, well, he was just going for the ball. No, sorry. If you're going to obstruct the runner in any way, shape, or form, you have to have the ball. If you have the ball, you can do whatever you want. You can block the bag, you can whatever. But you can't do it if you don't have possession of the ball. And so you can't block off the baseline, base path, or home plate or anything like that. So a couple rules of thumb: on a thrown ball, the runner has the right to the base path. We talked about that. Batted ball, the fielder has the right to field the ball. Okay. Next slide. So there's two types of obstruction in Little League Baseball, and we call them type A and type B. So we'll talk about type A obstruction first. Type A obstruction occurs when a play is being made on a runner. So you're going to call an immediate dead ball. It's time. That's obstruction. That's what the umpire is going to call. And you're going to award the bases the runner would have reached if there had been no obstruction. So in type A obstruction, you have to award at least one base beyond the last base legally touched. So that's the requirement. You can order more. You could award more, but typically it's going to be just the one base because a play is being made on the runner. How far are they going to go? And it's their last legally occupied base. So if he's obstructed before going into third, so say there's a play where the runner's going into third and his last legally occupied base was second base, he's only going to get third base because obstruction happened before, and that's one base beyond. So that's typically what you're going to see on obstruction with a play. You'll see this at home a lot, where a play at home where the throw takes the catcher into the runner. That's probably one of the more common types you'll see, type A obstruction. And so remember, the big thing about it is you have to have the ball to obstruct the runner. And that's type A. So type A, immediate dead ball, and always award one base beyond the last legally occupied base. And our next one is, guess what? Type B obstruction. So this is when a play is not being made on a runner. Okay. Typically, you'll see this a lot of times, the fielder getting in the way of the runner rounding first, like the first baseman getting in the way of the runner rounding first, or the middle infielders getting in the way of the runner rounding second. So that's where you typically see this. So it's when the play is not being made on a runner. And this is a delayed dead ball. We're going to let that play continue. So the umpire is supposed to point and say that's obstruction, nice and loud. And then if let the play go, if there's no play being made on the obstructed runner, let it go. And then once the play is over, we're going to call time, and we're going to impose. Now, this is important for you to recognize this for managers and coaches. The umpire shall then call time and impose such penalties, if any, as in the umpire's judgment will nullify the act of obstruction. So sometimes we won't award bases. Sometimes we'll award one base, sometimes two. It's up to you. So for instance, if there is a play where there's the runner has hit a straight base hit and he's rounding first base and there's contact with the first baseman. If in your judgment he was never making it beyond second base or first base, it was just a straight base hit, we're not going to award second base. Why would we? So there's no need for that. But if you think that he could have gone to second base, then you can, in your judgment, you can protect the batter runner to second base. So that's how that works. So that's a delayed dead ball, and you're going to award bases to nullify the act of obstruction, if any. So it's not a guarantee. Now you're also going to protect them. So if you decide you're going to protect them to second base, I'm going to protect them to second base, but they decide to try for third base, well, too bad. It's whatever you were going to protect them to. If they want to go beyond that, you know, that's it. So, and note too, if the defensive player blocks the base or played on or baseline clearly without possession of the ball, obstruction shall be called. Okay. So you can't block the base. Again, that goes back to the definition of obstruction. You can't block the base without the ball. Okay. Q&A on that. Do we have anything, Dave?
I cannot believe we don't have questions on interference and obstruction. Okay, Greg has his hand up, so go ahead, Greg.
So just to clarify, if the ball passes the shortstop and hits a runner going from second to third, then that runner isn't out?
Okay, so yes. So good question. So the rule says that if the ball goes past the fielder through the fielder or past the fielder, certainly if the ball is touched, if it's deflected off a fielder, then the runner's not out and hits the runner behind them. So you're talking about maybe the shortstop, if I'm understanding correctly, the shortstop is playing in, the runner runs behind him, the ball goes through the fielder's legs, right? And then hits that runner. Yeah, that's nothing play on. That's the way it goes. If it goes next to them, it's nothing. As long as there wasn't another fielder behind them with the ability to make the play. So sometimes on that play, you'll have the third baseman coming in hard to try to get that ball. It'll go past them. The shortstop will be beyond the third baseman, and the runner will basically be going in between them. So that is an exception in the rule book. If there's someone else has a play on it, then yes, they can still be out for interference. But typically the ball has to go. Now the rule says on or by or through or by a fielder, I believe is what it says. And when we talk about going by a fielder, it doesn't mean 10 feet away. It's basically in the fielding vicinity of the player. And that will protect the runner behind him. But if it's a straight hit through the 5-5 hole or something, there's no fielder around it, doesn't matter. If that runner's behind him and they get hit with the ball, they're out. So pretty much if a runner gets hit by a batted ball, they're out, unless the fielder had a chance to make a play. And it's that play is in the general vicinity of that player. Does that make sense?
John, to clarify, it doesn't mean that the fielder touches the ball. As long as they have a reasonable expectation to make the play, then potentially that runner's not out. And
correct.
That's a big judgment call.
They don't have to touch it, no. But it does have to go, like I said, I believe it says through or by the fielder. So yeah. So yeah. So basically, if they do get hit on a batted ball, no matter where they're at, it's an out. So yeah, but it's got to go through or by the fielder. I forget what rule that is. But anyway, but that's it. Go ahead.
You just crushed 45 years of baseball knowledge.
Yeah, well, it's that through or by a fielder. People just automatically think, oh, it went by a fielder. I mean, it was 10 feet off to his left or right, but that's not the rule. The interpretation on the rule, the clarification is it's in the general vicinity of that. So yeah, so it's not an automatic protection if they're running behind the fielder.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other question on that?
John, I think this is a first. This is a first ever for Rules Clinic where everyone just understood interference obstruction. Didn't have a single question on that. I think it's
maybe they're just zoned out. I don't know. Maybe it's getting late. I don't know. So anyway,
So speaking of getting
Okay.
late, why don't we
Yes.
take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to get into the runner, and then based on time, we're going to get either completely through or partially through the batter. So 5 minutes, and we will see you back here in just a bit.
Okay.
And
Dave, I did find clarification on
Okay.
that intentionally dropped fly ball. So not only do you have the rule book that you can reference, but the rule book is kind of, a document with not a lot of explanation in it. So most of your organizations, high school pro and things like that, they'll do, and Little League will do an interpretation manual to explain a lot of these things. High school does a really good job of it with their case book. They'll list just a ton of plays, a whole book of different plays, and give you explanations, stuff like that, or they'll come out with what's called ARs, authoritative rulings and stuff like that. The pro one is this one. A lot of them use this one here, this one, and I referred to this too because Little League is based on professional baseball rules as well. So there's a lot of information that can be utilized here, some interpretations. Little League they've done a good job with this called the rules instruction manual. And I believe they still give this out at the week long, and you can get it, it's not, unfortunately, it's right as of now. I don't know if it's like a nationwide document. This used to come out of the West region. Some people put it together, but I think it's going to be incorporated within the next year or so, and everyone's going to get it. But this is like an interpretation manual. They give explanations to the different rules. So if you go to the infield fly section here, it says when an infield fly is called, this is the instructor's comment, when an infield fly is called, runners may advance at their own risk. If on an infield fly rule, the infielder intentionally drops a fair ball, the ball remains in play despite the provision of Rule 6.05K. The infield fly rule takes precedence. So in that particular play, he was allowed, the fielder, if it was called an infield fly, the fielder was allowed to purposely drop it because the penalty's there, the batter's already out. So it was actually a heads up play on that kid and well within the rules if it was called an infield fly. So that should have been that runner that was trying to advance from second base. He should have known. In reality, he should have known that he doesn't have to advance, but he got confused and then he advanced. So it should have been 2 outs on that play if it was called infield fly. If it was not called infield fly, then you just call the batter runner out and put the runners back to their base at time of pitch.
John,
Greg, you have a question?
What is the timing on calling infield fly?
So the timing is everyone calls it usually at the apex of the ball, the apex of the fly ball. So you kind of call it there. That's generally speaking, or when it starts to come down. Sometimes you're calling it a little bit late, depending on the level of play. Maybe it's not that, high, or sometimes it's a little, maybe like a Texas League hit or something like that, a little flare, then you're not sure, So the best thing to do is to call it, is to be aware of the situation. And if you're working with a partner or partners, you should have your pre-pitch signal of infield fly situation, so that's in your head. And then if someone calls it, everybody echoes it. The best thing to do is if you're going to call it, is to call it nice and loud. And then maybe if you're a little late on it, keep repeating it. That's where I think a lot of the confusion comes, where people aren't vocal enough about it. You got to scream it out because people are just, they don't hear it. Same with obstruction and interference, things like that. You really got to yell it. But I think that's the issue with a lot of people is they're not vocal about it. Because you can call a little bit late, but just be vocal and confident about it, and that really helps. But the idea is, in a perfect world, at the top of the fly ball, that's when you should call it.
All right. let's get back to the slideshow.
All right,
And
I think that's you, Dave, isn't it?
that's me. I'll take it from here.
All right, Dave's
You
going to
can
take over. Thank you all very much.
sit back and have a drink. Is that allowed?
No.
Okay. So first up, two runners occupying the same base. And I'm not going to read all of the text, but there's one important one important aspect of this to remember. The lead runner is entitled to the base unless forced. I'm going to repeat that for emphasis. The lead runner is entitled to the base unless forced. So if the ball is put into play and the runner is forced to advance and remains on that base, then the lead runner would be the one that is out if both of them are tagged. In every other case, in a pickoff situation where you wind up with two runners on the same base, it is the trailing or following runner that shall be called out when tagged. Now, in a lot of these situations, and in this picture, what you can see, the fielder actually, they don't know who the right runner is. So they're going to just tag them both. And for you umpires out there, it's really important when they tag the runner who is not out to indicate, point at them, and call them safe. And when they tag the runner who is out, point at that runner. As you can see in this picture here, he's pointing at the following runner to indicate that the following runner is out. What you don't want to have happen as an umpire is to make it unclear which of them is then out, because you might actually have an out on the following runner, but the preceding runner thinks that they're out and starts walking off the base. And now the fielder tags them while they're off the base, and well, you've got a double play. Does that make sense? So we have this. Well, first of all, I'll say on an out of play or lodged ball, a lodged ball is equivalent to a ball out of play. So there is no distinction on that. And in terms of penalties on an out of play or a lodged ball, we have this mnemonic that we remember, one from the rubber, two from the field, that kind of gives us guidance or lets us remember easily how many base awards there are when the ball goes out of play or is lodged. So if it is, so the award of bases is from, if it's time of pitch or let me just back up because I'm getting tongue-tied here. Time of pitch is the award, the base award is time of pitch if the throw is the first play by an infielder, including the pitcher, right? So the pitcher can throw it out of play. It's time of throw on any other play. So first play by an outfielder, second play by an infielder. Now here, there's a couple important things to note. A pitcher stepping off the plate with their pivot foot becomes a fielder, and then the award would be two bases. And if all runners, including the batter runner, have advanced at least one base when an infielder makes a wild throw on the first play after the pitch, the award shall be governed by the position of the runners when the wild throw was made. So you might be wondering how this could actually happen, but I've seen it happen plenty of times where you'll have, let's say you have a runner on first, batter runner hits it to the shortstop. Shortstop is bobbling it. Meanwhile, you have a very fast batter runner and actually acquires first base when the shortstop finally stops bobbling that ball and guns it to first, not realizing that the batter runner is already there. So in that situation, if R1 had acquired second and the batter runner had acquired first at the time of the throw, even if it's the first play by an infielder, the penalty would be a two-base award. Okay, so let's talk about some examples of lodged balls, if a pitched ball lodges in the padding in the backstop, for instance, you know it's not lodged if it rebounds and comes back into the field of play. But if it wedges in there and stops, it's probably a lodged ball. If it sticks underneath a fence, a gate, a padding, and stops and is wedged and is inaccessible, it is most certainly a lodged ball. There's some gray area in there, and umpires, you're just going to have to use judgment. But if it just simply stops against the bottom of a wall or a fence and it's accessible by the fielder, then it is probably not a lodged ball. Now you can, and we talked about this earlier where, I think we talked about this earlier where a ball gets lodged in umpire's paraphernalia, right? So maybe a pitch ball winds up in the umpire's ball bag. Rare, but it's funny when you see it happen. What is more common is a pitched ball lodging into the umpire's chest protector, or sorry, the catcher's chest protector. So you'll see this. I've had this happen a handful of times, and it's always, the catcher's frantically trying to get the ball out of their chest protector. Well, that ball is a lodged ball. The play is immediately called dead, and runners advance one base. All right. Any runner is out when the runner does not slide or attempt to get around a fielder who has the ball and is waiting to make a tag. For some reason, we continue to see this year after year, coaches, managers thinking that a player must slide. And they have emphasized it in the approved ruling in the rule book. There is no must slide rule. Now, it's also, there is a portion to this rule that is often overlooked. So they need to slide or attempt to get around a fielder who has the ball, so part one, and is waiting to make a tag, part two. This doesn't give the runner freedom to just crash into a fielder who doesn't have the ball. So there's still a sportsmanship component to this. So if a fielder is kind of in the way, there could be obstruction. But if the fielder's in the way without the ball, that doesn't mean that they don't have to slide or attempt to get around. They still have to, from a sportsmanship standpoint, not crash into this fielder. All right, head first slide. So we're talking about Little League majors and below. Greg, go ahead and put your question in chat. We will get to you at the end of this section.
I just don't know how.
Oh, you don't know how to put it in chat. Okay.
Sorry.
So for you, everyone else who's old school, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, scribble it down, and then raise your hand at the end. All right, so 708A4, we're talking about head first slides. And so this only applies to Little League majors and below, only Little League majors and below. A runner is out when the runner slides head first while advancing. And the important distinction here is while advancing. This rule does not apply when a runner is returning to a base, only while advancing to a base. The ball remains live and all other runners may advance at their own risk. So if you have an out on a head first slide, the ball is not dead. They're out just as if they were tagged out, for instance. Okay, so let's talk about a case play that is maybe kind of to the extreme edge of this rule. So you have a runner on second. They advance almost all the way to third when the throw from the outfield gets to third base right in front of them. They retreat all the way back to second. So let's say that they were 1 to 2 feet away from third base when they retreated all the way back, almost 60 feet back to second base, and full Superman, head first slide back into second. Legal head first slide or illegal? And that would be legal.
Legal.
So
Yeah.
they are returning to the base. So it doesn't matter how far they have run. Now, normally they get their lead, their secondary, and then they're jumping back to second. And it's just an obvious return to the base. But for the purpose of this rule, we make no distinction there how far they've gone. All right, so let's talk about runner appeals. No runner may return to touch a missed base after a following runner has scored. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. When the ball is dead, no runner may return to touch a missed base after touching an advanced base. Okay. So fourth out considerations. It gets to be a little bit tricky. And this is usually in a situation where you want a different out that's going to bring a run off the board. And so if you're appealing a situation where somebody had scored and you want them out, or you're appealing a force play for the third out that would nullify that run, then you have this apparent fourth out. So the comment says, be alert in third out, fourth out situations, whether the appeal play is a force out or a time play when allowing runs to score. So that's the important distinction. So we have maybe a couple scenarios in here to think about. Let's say you have a bases loaded with 2 outs. The batter runner hits a triple but misses first base as they advance to third. A proper appeal is executed, resulting in an out of the batter runner missing first base. The inning is over and no runs will be allowed to score. So what this says, if we reread the section of the comment, be alert in third out, fourth out situations, whether the appeal play is a force out. So technically, it's not a force out at first, but it is. It's a definition of a force play is somebody who must vacate their base as a result of the ball being put in play. So there's the specific rule that you want to look at is Rule 409A, and that says a run is not scored if the runner advances to home base during a play in which the third out is made by the batter runner before touching first base. So even though I'm splitting hairs by saying that it's not a force out, for all intents and purposes, it is a force out. Okay, so let's talk about leaving early. Leaving early and failure to tag, failure to retouch are not the same thing, and we should not use these terms interchangeably. I think most people commonly understand that in a fly ball situation, did they leave before the ball was caught? If you call that leaving early, most people understand what you're talking about. But for the purpose of clarity, as we discuss these rules, leaving early is the rule in majors and minors when a runner leaves the base before the ball reaches the batter. So when a pitcher is in contact with the pitcher's plate and in possession of the ball, and the catcher's in the catcher's box ready to receive delivery of the ball, base runners shall not leave their bases until the ball has been delivered and has reached the batter. So we're going to take a little detour here and talk about what this rule does not say. It does not say that a pitcher can run back to the mound and the catcher can get into the box ready to receive delivery of the ball in order to force a base runner who is off the bag back onto their base. If a base runner is advancing and is not in contact with the base, they have every right to continue advancing at their peril to try and achieve the next base. Now, John, you might be able to speak to the interpretation of this. I think logically, and I think that they cover this more specifically in softball, but that runner, while off the base, has to make a decision and either advance or return. I just don't know how much time did they have?
Are you talking in softball or baseball?
Baseball.
Okay. So how much time do they have to return to the base? Um, I mean, generally speaking, that hasn't really been, an issue for me. I just, just because of circumstance, they generally just go back. But I mean, they've got to be back there before. What's the criteria for that? Um, you've got to be back while the pitcher is ready to pitch and the catcher is ready to receive the ball. You know, so I would say not quite immediately, but you know,
Pretty
pretty
soon.
close.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, pretty soon. And I mean, if they're lollygagging, they're subject to being thrown out as well too. So they could, a back pick in to some of these kids.
Okay, so the violation by one base runner affects all other base runners. I'm going to repeat this for emphasis. The violation of leaving early by one base runner shall affect all other base runners, which means that it doesn't matter who committed the violation. If you've got multiple runners and one of them left early, it's the same as any of them or all of them left early. So when a base runner leaves and the batter does not hit the ball, any outstand and runners return to their base last legally occupied. Now it's a delayed dead ball. If they are thrown out, they get to be thrown out. And then if any one of them advance in this situation, the umpire would throw their red flag. Hopefully they have a red flag. Hopefully they're not throwing their hat on the ground. And then you would call time and you would return runners back to their base last legally occupied. Essentially, the rule of thumb here is that you're going to back them up as far as they can back to the base that they last legally occupied. If the ball is hit, any outstands and the runners return to their original bases or to the unoccupied base nearest the one that was left. Batter must not advance beyond first base on a single or error, second base on a double, or third base on a triple. Now, I highlighted this in particular because the umpire in chief, which is usually the plate umpire, but not always in a two or more umpire crew, the umpire in chief determines the base value of the hit ball. So if you see a ball hit to the outfield right in the gap, it's probably going to be a double or a triple. And regardless of a runner leaving early in that situation, you are not going to allow the batter runner or any other runners advancing beyond the value of that hit. So if you determine that the value of the hit is a double, then the furthest the batter runner can go is second base. If there was a runner ahead of them, they're going to get backed up to third base. And then any other runner would, of course, score that was in front of the runner now on third base. If in the situation of a bunt or hits a ball within the infield or advances on an uncaught third strike, no run shall be allowed to score. This is commonly known as a poof play with bases loaded. I've never seen this. Have you seen it, John? No. It's almost happened to me like 100 times to where you'll see one of the runners get a little antsy and jump off the base before the ball reaches the batter. But then in that situation, the ball is either maybe there's a walk or maybe the ball is not hit in the infield or whatever the case is. But that's the only kind of situation where you'll penalize without allowing a run to score. So there's a list of exceptions and examples. It's really one of the largest rules in the Little League rulebook. And for the purpose of keeping this brief on the slide, I didn't list all of those exceptions and examples, but it's a really good read and it will help you understand it. So what we're teaching here in this rules clinic is just kind of the rule of thumb. You back them up as much as you possibly can. Okay, so courtesy runners, and I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. It's a little bit different if you have a traditional lineup, but as far as I know, none of our leagues are using a traditional lineup. So I'm just going to be talking about it from the context of continuous batting order being used. So a local league may permit, this is a league option, to use of a courtesy runner for the catcher and or pitcher of record when there are two outs. And so this is a speed up rule to allow the catcher and or pitcher to start warming up when there's two outs so we can keep the game moving. So in a continuous batting order situation, the courtesy runner may be in the team's batting order. It must be the player in the batting order who was out last. You are not allowed to skip over a player. So if the last out was your pitcher of record and you want to get your catcher who is out on base geared up and warmed up, then you're going to use your pitcher as a courtesy runner for your catcher. A significant update for this year says that if the pitcher and catcher of record are on base with two outs, the offense may use a courtesy runner for both of them at the same time. And you'll place the courtesy runners in order on bases. So if you had pitcher on second, catcher on third base, and you wanted to use courtesy runners for both of them, the last out would go to second base, and the second to last out would go to third base. All right. The highlighted section of this is really important. It says of record. This is different from any of you who remember the fall ball rule. This speed up rule is only for the pitcher and catcher of record, meaning they were the pitcher and catcher in the final inning or on the lineup for your first inning. So you can't just say, I'm going to bring that guy in as my catcher next inning in order to get a courtesy runner for them. Even if you did intend to do that, this is obviously an exception that is created to avoid manipulation of the rules, because you might just have the person who was out last happens to be really fast, and the person who is on base might happen to be really slow, and you could use that to your advantage to get a courtesy runner to substitute them when you really shouldn't have. Okay, I think we've got some questions, so let's go to Q&A. And actually, Greg, I think you were first with your hand up, so why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Sorry, Dave, you caught me off guard there.
Oh.
So the first question, if a runner slows because of an interfering player in the field, so in the minors more so than anything else, I see this a lot where the first baseman's just standing in the middle of the line trying to catch the ball, and the runner slows because of it. Is there an interference issue here, or do we just need to teach him to run through?
Well, okay, so let's talk about that from a couple different perspectives. If the runner is trying to block a fielder's ability to field the ball, either to cause them to not see it, because in the case of let's take a scenario where you have a hard hit ground ball to the shortstop, you have R2 coming off the bag, stopping directly in the path of the ball, and then moving away at the last second so that the shortstop can't see it until it's too late to field it, then you would have intentional doesn't need to be intentional, but you have intentional interference on that runner, and he would be out and time would immediately be called. So in a situation where a runner is attempting to slow down to avoid contact with a fielder who is trying to field a ball, I've got nothing on that. Now, did either of those situations describe what you were talking about?
No, not really, because for the most part in minors, you have a lot of first basemen who don't have the experience or knowledge to stay out of the path. So you have first basemen that, and it may not even be a fully played ball, where the first baseman is just standing there and the runner slows down because the first baseman's standing in the base path and the runner stops because they're afraid to hit another kid. Then the ball gets thrown and the runner is stopped essentially. And
yeah, so you need to look at the definition of obstruction for that. So if the fielder impedes the runner, then you probably have obstruction on that play.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's letter of the law, spirit of the law.
Well, remember, Greg, the fielder. So you're talking about maybe a ground ball to the shortstop, and then, if I'm understanding this correctly, maybe a ground ball to the shortstop, and then the first baseman's kind of standing in the way of the batter runner trying to make it to first.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in that case, there, again, like Dave says, the definition of obstruction, the fielder has to have possession of the ball. They can't be, there's no in the act of fielding, so they can't be, trying to come up the line on an errant throw or something like that. So you as an umpire have to judge, did the fielder impede the progress of the runner? And so in this case, probably, if they didn't have the ball. If they have the ball, then, all bets are off. But if they didn't have the ball and they cause that runner to slow up or something like that because they're in the way for whatever reason, if they're set up that way or they're or the throw takes them that way, they don't have the ball. It's obstruction.
Copy.
And Greg, it's important to understand that there does not have to be contact for obstruction to be called, but it usually makes it more obvious when there is.
Right. So the follow-up is with a pitcher on the rubber. And so you got a pitcher on the rubber, you've got a runner off first base. So we're teaching our pitchers to get back, touch the rubber, and then the runners can't advance. But from what I heard tonight, if the runner's off and the pitcher gets to the rubber, that doesn't just stop the play. The runner has the opportunity, if they so choose, to advance at their own peril.
That's right. Now, the reality is, with the pitcher on the rubber and the catcher in the catcher's box ready to receive the pitch, they're not going anywhere. So the smart thing to do from a pace of play standpoint is for coaches to just tell their players to get back. They're not going anywhere. We don't want the game to just become this standstill where they're just doing this staring competition. So even though they may not be required by rule to get back immediately, we should get them back.
Copy.
Well, in that situation there, like the softball rule is there's that chalk circle. And once the pitcher enters that circle, the runner has to get back. They have to get back immediately. In this case, if the runner is a couple feet off the base or something like that, and the pitcher is on the mound, there's really nothing that happens. I mean, the rule states that on a foul ball, all base runners have to, retouch their bases. But in that particular case right there, if the pitcher makes the pitch and that kid is still off the base, well, he's violated what is that, 713. So, he's going to be guilty of leaving early. So
Right.
there's no real, there's no real hard and fast rule that they have to get back. In practice, they're going to get back because the pitcher can throw over there and you could get him into a rundown and you can get, someone out. But in that situation there, um, you know, they're probably going to be in violation of 713 anyway.
Okay, so let me put my coach's hat on and say that my kid's got an aggressive secondary and he's off, but the pitcher gets back to the rubber. But my kid's still 8 feet off first base. He's allowed to go to second, even if the pitcher is on the rubber.
Well, if the pitcher's on the rubber and the catcher is ready to receive the ball, then he's going to be guilty. He's going to be guilty of violating 713.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if he's got a secondary lead and the pitcher, in other words, he doesn't have to go back at that particular time. You understand? He doesn't have to. There's no rule, So if the pitchers, you've seen that how many times? You see that in minors a lot. The with a kid at third, there's the dance off the base there, and it drives everyone crazy. And then when the pitcher turns around, then the kid takes off. Well, he hasn't violated 713 at that point because he hasn't done anything. The pitcher's not on. So the rule is that the pitcher's got to be on the mound, the catcher's got to receive, be ready to receive the ball. And I believe the batter doesn't have to be in the box either in that particular play.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
I believe you're right, John. The batter does not have to be in the box.
yeah. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, can they? And like I said, the game at as they progress, the game has a way of in the majors of taking care of that. You don't see too many kids do that because they can throw and catch, and it's easy to pick the kid off or something like that. Or if he makes the pitch, if they're even before he makes the pitch, if he's off the base, he's guilty of 713. So he's
All right.
he's gonna get sent back anyway.
Copy. Are you just advancing my knowledge as a third base coach?
Yeah, just remember that the pitcher can't just use that rule as a method of holding up a runner from advancing.
Perfect.
So a runner who is off the base and who is in the process of advancing, they can't just go immediately take their positions and tell him to go back. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to get as far as we can into the batter, and we're going to start with a local league option for keeping 1 foot in the batter's box throughout the at-bat. Now, this is also a pretty lengthy section of exceptions, and for the purpose of this slide, I've replaced that list of exceptions with a rule of thumb. This rule doesn't apply when the batter swings at the pitch or is forced out of the box or the pitch is not caught. So that's maybe easier to remember than a list of 7 or 8 exceptions. I can't remember how many there are in there. It's worth a read in the rule book. But essentially, if the batter swings, they can get out. They don't have to keep 1 foot in the box. If they're forced out of the box, and in other words, if they're trying to get out of the way of a pitched ball, or if a runner is advancing home, or the pitch is not caught. So let's say that they stay in the box, they do not swing at the pitch is in the dirt, and then the catcher catches it. That is an uncaught pitched ball, and they can step out with both feet. Umpires, don't make this your best call. We don't want to use this as a club to penalize batters if they step out briefly. So you'll notice here under the penalty section, for the purpose of our clinic, I have modified the rule with a suggestion. So where it said before, if the batter leaves the batter's box or delays play, we'll just change that or to an and. If they leave the batter's box and delay play, and none of the exceptions apply, then the umpire shall warn the batter. The first offense is a warning, and after that, it's a strike. Now, in minors and majors, the ball is dead and no runners may advance. But in intermediate and up, the ball is live. Okay, so we have a discussion about legal position. So keep in mind that this is the batter starting legal position, which is different from where they wind up with, where they'll wind up as they're batting. Okay, so we're going to watch a video and we'll talk about kind of some of the nuance around this rule. There is some interpretation as to what these words mean. So I'm just going to read it. The batter's legal position shall be with both feet within the batter's box. So look at some of these examples. Is number 2 within the batter's box? Part of the foot is within the batter's box. So our interpretation, and let's just say the correct interpretation, right, John, is that when you say within the batter's box, you're talking about the entirety of the foot. That's the correct interpretation. Everyone else that doesn't have that interpretation is wrong. Okay. we're being a little overly confident in our ability to interpret these rules here. There, you'll find some people who definitely do not agree with this. But I would say in this example, 1 and 2 are clearly not entirely within the batter's box. And number 3 is within, because the line of the batter's box is part of the batter's box. So as long as any part of that foot doesn't start outside of that batter's box, you're okay. Okay, and you can see that in the approved ruling. So now I'm going to reshare this with audio because I have a video from the World Series that I think probably illustrates this better than anything.
1-1 our score. Kanta Iwashita bats against Willians Morta. Up and in with Kanta Iwashita hovering over home plate himself.
Mike, he was purposely just about on the plate because he hasn't even been this close. But look at where his foot lands. My man is on the dish.
With a runner at second. The time call.
Foot has to be all the way in the box. Okay.
Here we go. Are you ready?
We knew it. Tell me about it, Mike.
So you can't be over the line at all with any part of your foot. You basically have to be wherever the line would be, inside of it.
All right, let me reshare this. Oh, hold on a second. Let me get out of that slide. Okay. All right, so hopefully that clears it up. Now, there's a couple interesting elements to that video. One that we'll talk about now and one that we'll save for a little bit later. Okay, so you notice that the batter, actually, let me bring up this video and I'm just going to advance it to right there. If you determine that the pitched ball contacts the batter within the strike zone, which it's kind of tough to call from this angle, but it looks like there's a pretty decent chance that that ball was, you know, about armpit height and looks to be over the plate. In that situation, you would have a dead ball strike. So part of the reason why for you umpires, you want to keep them from their feet being over the line is purely for safety purposes. We don't want players trying to gain an advantage against the pitcher by creeping toward the plate and occupying an area that a pitcher normally would be able to pitch into. So if you watch some of these Little League World Series games this last season, it was exploited pretty significantly until I believe his name is Ricky Hall. I don't know, John, if I'm getting his name right, you can chime in. But that the second part to that video was when Ricky called time and pushed that batter back, because it started out that some of these players were a little bit over the line, and as we started getting deeper and deeper into the World Series, it became even more egregious to the point where they were just basically starting almost touching home plate. So if the ball hits the batter anywhere over the strike zone, that's a strike. That's element one. And then the second part of that is where their foot is. If the foot is completely outside of the box when they're swinging at a pitched ball, and if they make contact with a foot entirely outside of the batter's box, that's a different part of this rule, and we're going to see that here in just a bit. All right, so we have a number of slides for 605, and all of these are a batter is out when. So a batter is out when a third strike is not caught by the catcher, when the first base is occupied, before two are out. And a local league may elect to apply the minor league and T-ball rule for the Little League Major Division for the regular season. However, I don't think any of you are, and it probably would be a mistake because the uncaught third strike is going to be in play in all of our tournaments, our Tournament of Champions, our midseason tournaments, and All-Stars. Now, we use very specific terminology when we're talking about this. This is a strike not caught. It is not a dropped third strike. The ball does not have to be dropped. The important distinction, it is a strike that is not caught. In the approved ruling, when a batter becomes a runner on a third strike that is not caught and starts for the bench, that batter may advance to first base at any time before entering the dugout or any other dead ball area. To put the batter out, the defense must tag the batter or first base before the batter touches first base. So you're going to see this a lot for first-time majors players that are not used to this rule. That's why we definitely want to exercise this option. They may not know, and everyone's screaming at them to run to first, and they get almost all the way to their dugout before they finally realize, oh shoot, I could actually run to first, and then they still can. Okay, so 605E. A batter is out when that batter attempts to hit a third strike and is touched by the ball. So we talked about this earlier, and we will talk about it some more, and we have some videos for you to consider. And I almost never use animation in my slideshows, except where it's warranted. And for some reason, this is the number one myth in baseball, and it just won't die. The hands are not now and have never been part of the bat. So you'll have some coaches say, when did they change that rule? They never changed it. It was never that. The hands were never part of the bat. When it happens, it's an immediate dead ball. Okay, so let's reshare with audio.
1-2 to Prince. And that hit his hand.
All right, I'm going to pause the video here. From that little video clip that you just watched, I want you to be thinking, was that a swing or was it not a swing? Okay, we're going to watch a little bit more. I don't know why that advanced.
1-2 to Prince. And that hit his hand. Trying to shake that off.
I'm gonna just scrub ahead in the interest of time because we're almost at time. So that might give you a clue. And right there, probably not a swing, right? Okay, so that one was ruled hit by pitch, and he was awarded first base. Now let's watch this one.
Struggled lately
against lefties. Now the 0-1. Hit him.
Did he go? What do you think? Might actually post that in chat. We've got about a minute left here. Post it in chat. Did you think he went? I don't know if you saw this game or not. You might actually have an advantage. I'm going to back that up and watch at full speed.
He has struggled lately against lefties. Now the 0-1.
Did he go?
Got him on the back foot, it appeared.
Okay. Let's advance that. Boy. That one is close. I could see he tried to hold up right there, but he knew he was going to get hit. Where the bat kind of wound up is kind of out in front of him, but I don't think that was a natural swing. Like, I could see this being called both ways, but in the game, it was determined that he went, and we'll watch that at full speed. We don't use this mechanic in Little League, but you can see that he clearly said that he went.
He has struggled lately.
Okay. And I think we're going to hold it up right there. Let me stop my share. And we are going to take a question now or two, whatever we have. Mark says he went. Steven says no. Bill says yeah. Steven says, wait. Steven.
I changed my call.
Oh. I'm so confused. Okay, on the field, don't change your call. Stick with your call unless your partner has some information for you. Donald says he went. Burger, yes. Okay, so I see everyone in agreement. Some not immediately for in the camp of yes, but I think he probably went. Yeah, that's a fair assessment there. So we can see that the batter swinging when they get hit has a large part plays a large part in determining what ends up happening. You know, they could get plunked square right in their body, but if they actually went for it, then that's a dead ball strike. All right.
And one thing I wanted to add on Berger's comment, his wrist rounded forward. So on a check swing like that, there's actually no criteria for what constitutes a check swing. In either professional, but there's only college has kind of quantified that, but no other rule set has that. Is that all it is umpire judgment. Do you think the batter offered it the pitch? That's it. And so, I mean, in the pro example, I think he did. I'm a little more, I grab as many strikes as I can. I would, in that first clip, the Little League Regional, I would have been all right if he would have called that a strike as well, too.
Fair.
So, yeah, and the Major League is really poor examples of how we should rule on that. Some of these guys, it seems like I think I'd grab almost every check swing in the major leagues, and they don't a lot. So I'm pretty generous about that. I do grab as many as I could get. So I would not have argued if in the Little League example as well. But the point I'm trying to make is there's no criteria unless you're calling college ball. There's no criteria. It's, do you think he went? That's it.
So let's take one more question before we wrap it up. Eric says, if the batter's box lines are worn away, can the batter be called for being outside the box? So what we were talking about was the starting position. And regardless of whether those lines are worn away or not, you roughly know if they are too close to home plate. And if they are, so that's 4 inches on a Little League small diamond and 6 inches is it 6 inches for intermediate? That I don't know. 6 inches for juniors and up.
Yeah, it's 6 inches for sure for juniors. Intermediate might be the same way too.
So, so if you know, okay, thank you, Bill. If you know that they're too close, you're not calling anything. You're not penalizing anything. You're just calling time and telling them to back up a little bit. So we haven't yet talked about what happens when their foot is entirely outside of the box on a batted ball, and we're going to get to that tomorrow. Some managers encourage players to erase the back line with their foot. Yeah, exactly. Well, just remember those same managers are putting their players in jeopardy of getting hit. And we just don't want that at this level. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there. And we will see you all tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. for the remainder of our rules clinic. Thank you all for attending. John, you have any closing remarks?
Just to echo what you said, thanks a lot for showing up tonight and trying to improve yourself in your leagues. I'll be happy to, some of us will be happy to hang around here if you got any more questions. We're happy to hang out for a little bit. If Dave, you're running the show there, you're the administrator. So if you have time, we'll be happy to take any other questions on anything that you want to talk about, not just of what happened tonight, but if you have any other umpiring questions, we'll be happy to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to stop recording though.